Thank you. Please proceed when you are ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am pleased to be here today to discuss the results of our study pursuant to House Resolution 87. From the smallest seed to the most enormous elk, over 25,000 flora and fauna species share the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with nearly 13 million people. You do not have to look far to see just how deeply rooted in history the importance of Pennsylvania's outdoors is. Pennsylvania's name itself translates to Penn's Woods in Latin. The Commonwealth Constitution also firmly establishes the significance of Pennsylvania's natural resources. Article 1, Section 27 states, "The people have a right to clean air, pure water, and to the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all the people, including generations yet to come. As trustee of these resources, the Commonwealth shall conserve and maintain them for the benefit of all the people." The development of land in Pennsylvania for business and housing has created significant economic benefits. At the same time, this development has created negative consequences for the Commonwealth's flora and fauna. Habitat fragmentation, or separating natural habitats into non-contiguous areas, prevents wildlife and plants from life-sustaining movement for food, water, mates, and other biologically necessary processes. Conservation connectivity is one scientifically backed way to counter habitat fragmentation. H.R. 87 directed LBFC to study the current status, management, and benefits of conservation corridors. Conservation corridors can mean different things. Sometimes it involves preserving existing natural corridors, such as rivers and mountain ranges. Other times, it is designating areas as conservation zones or adding on to existing protected land, such as federal, state, or local parks. And other times, it prevents land from future development, such as easements. Conservation corridors can be as small as at the neighborhood level or as large as the Commonwealth itself. For example, Pennsylvania is a massive corridor for migrating species in North America. Despite the lack of official public policy requiring the development or implementation of conservation corridors in Pennsylvania, we found many stakeholders at the federal, state, and local levels directly and indirectly employing conservation corridor practices as part of other conservation efforts and mandated requirements. At the Commonwealth level, we found multiple state agencies and independent commissions working on aspects of conservation connectivity. These include the Departments of Agriculture, Conservation and Natural Resources, Environmental Protection, and Transportation, along with the Fish and Boat, Game, and Turnpike Commissions. PennDOT has constructed 35 wildlife crossing underpasses to make roadways safer for drivers and wildlife. The Turnpike Commission has constructed one wildlife underpass and is considering constructing a wildlife overpass with the redesign of the Allegheny Tunnel area. This is important because in 2022, over 4% of all vehicle crashes reported to PennDOT were animal-related. During the 4-year scope of our report, which was 2019 through 2022, there were tragically 44 human fatalities attributed to wildlife vehicle collisions. Additionally, Pennsylvania drivers ranked first nationwide for the number of wildlife vehicle collision auto insurance claims filed. According to State Farm estimates, over 153,000 wildlife vehicle collision claims were filed in the state fiscal year ended 2022. Studies have shown that wildlife crossings coupled with exclusionary fencing can reduce wildlife vehicle collisions by up to 97%. In its research, the United States Department of Agriculture noted it actually costs society less to solve the problem of wildlife vehicle collisions than it costs to do nothing. State-owned land presents opportunities to connect adjoining habitats for conservation connectivity. There are currently 3.9 million acres of state-owned land managed by DCNR and PGC, including state forests, state game lands, and state parks. At times, opportunities arise to add to existing state-owned land. For example, in 2022, DCNR added a new state parks in Chester, Wyoming, and York counties. According to DCNR, the state park in Wyoming County, Vosburgh Neck, was added due to significant pressure from residential and commercial development. The newly added park in York County, Susquehanna Riverlands, was added because the site adjoined and built on large tracts of already preserved open space. These considerations are conservation connectivity practices, preserving and protecting existing land and reconnecting habitats. When considering the expansion of state game lands, PGC's primary goals are to add lands adjacent to current game lands, conserve habitats, and provide connectivity. PGC land purchased through the Game Fund is statutorily limited to a maximum purchase price of $400 per acre, a figure set in the 1980s. If the General Assembly deems expanding Commonwealth-owned land a public policy priority in conservation connectivity, we recommend that it consider at a minimum an inflation adjustment to PGC's $400 per acre land acquisition limit. While Commonwealth agencies and commissions have differing, yet sometimes overlapping responsibilities, they have created partnerships among themselves. Likewise, these agencies have partnered with outside stakeholders, such as federal agencies and non-governmental organizations. Our report highlights partnerships employing and promoting conservation corridor practices, including the statewide Wildlife Action Plan, Conservation Landscape Program, Greenways, Trails, and Recreation Program, and the Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program. One of the newer partnerships was established in December of 2023 when the Federal Highway Administration announced the award of a Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program grant for the Pennsylvania Wildlife Crossing Strategic Plan and Analytical Tools Program. The grant was awarded to PennDOT and other Commonwealth partners to develop a comprehensive strategic plan for wildlife crossings. The program has 3 phases, including developing a multi-agency statewide wildlife crossing strategic plan, improving wildlife vehicle collision data collection and geographic information system mapping tools, and expanding public outreach. Work is expected to be completed by December 2027. We recommend the General Assembly consider requiring a study by the LBFC after implementing this program to provide an update on where Pennsylvania is in implementing conservation corridor procedures. Reviewing conservation connectivity practices in neighboring states with similar landscapes, species, and climates offered a comparison to gauge Pennsylvania's efforts. We found that most of the conservation connectivity tools surrounding states utilize are like Pennsylvania's. Through our research, we identified some areas for improvement for the Commonwealth to consider. For example, in New Jersey, a robust working group was established for the specific purpose of conservation connectivity collaboration. We recommend that Pennsylvania take a similar approach by the Office of the Governor convening an official interagency and commission conservation connectivity working group to build on existing collaboration, including federal and non-governmental partners. We further recommend that this working group identify high priority areas of conservation connectivity in Pennsylvania and establish common goals. We also identified best practices in conservation corridor development, including wildlife crossings, preserving natural corridors, collaboration, and data collection. As part of this, we researched funding options for conservation corridors used in other states and potential revenue sources. Other states utilize a variety of funding sources for conservation corridors. Florida is an example of a state that, through unanimous legislative action in 2021, invested over $400 million with $100 million reoccurring annually in protecting its wildlife corridors. If the Pennsylvania General Assembly deems conservation corridors a public policy priority, we recommend the consideration of funding to develop new and preserve existing conservation corridors. In closing, I want to touch on just how important outdoor recreation is in the Commonwealth. Conserved areas provide recreation, community, lawful hunting, and fishing. In 2022, the outdoor recreation sector's added value totaled $16.9 billion, or 1.8% of the Commonwealth's gross domestic product. This sector employs over 160,000 individuals, accounting for 2.7% of Pennsylvania's jobs. You could fill Beaver Stadium 15 times with the number of people purchasing Pennsylvania hunting and fishing licenses every year. Over 4 million people access Pennsylvania's rail trails annually for recreation and transportation, and the Commonwealth welcomes 40 million visitors to the state parks, with about 25% coming from out of state. In winter, Pennsylvania is home to over 5% of ski areas in the country. Conservation connectivity benefits humans, wildlife, and plants alike. I would like to thank all the Commonwealth agencies and independent commissions who provide us with information for this study, particularly DCNR and PennDOT, who also reviewed the draft of our report. Additionally, I would like to thank the countless stakeholders who provided us with insight into conservation connectivity from many different perspectives. Finally, I would like to thank LBFC staff analysts Morgan Smith and Josh Ballard, who assisted with this study. Madam Chair, members of the committee, at this time I would be happy to answer any questions you have about the HR 87 study.
Thank you, Ms. Sprankle. Representative Daly, would you care to offer a statement?
I just first want to thank LBFC for the work that they did. This was a long time coming. I worked on it, I think, since 2016, and it's really wonderful to hear what the report is saying. We saw a summary of it yesterday, and I'm excited to be able to read through it. I also want to thank the LBFC for taking it on as a project. I think the work has been exciting, and I think that we can really look at some ways to really relieve some of the pressure on, these roads that with so many accidents, because it's a phenomenal number, and it's an area that we do not want to rank first in traffic safety. And I also want to thank all of the people who came and provided information, because it was a huge group. I started out with DCNR and the Game Commission, Fish and Boat Commission, Audubon Society. There were so many organizations and departments that were really interested in this, so it feels really good. This is an excellent day for me, and I really appreciate the work that Stevie did on this. So thank you, Alto.
Thank you very much, Representative Daly, and I would like to reflect that we have been joined by Representative Samuelson. Again, thank you, Ms. Sprankle, and we'll turn to members. Are there any questions? Senator Dush.
Thank you. And Stevie, a couple questions. The research from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where you said it actually costs society less to solve the problem than it costs to do nothing. Do they have analytics on that? Or is there, can you forward us some information on it?
Sorry, yes, I can.
Okay. Do we have any data back from the 35 wildlife crossings that PennDOT's constructed?
They have set up trail cameras, and there is evidence that they're being used. They're all very different. I was impressed by. I had no idea coming into it that these even existed, to be honest with you, because they're not obvious when you're driving down the road. They're all underneath, and they're not. You think of Western states with the very large overpasses that have trees on them. They're very obvious. These are not very obvious. And they have evidence of deer using them, bear using them, and there's smaller ones that are specific to amphibians, and they have evidence that there's bog turtles and there's footprints of other things. So they're being used. To what extent that's measured, I don't know at this point, because it is kind of new. But I expect with their grant funding that they're going to be doing a lot more data collection. But there is evidence that they're being used.
Well, I'm glad that they're being used, because anytime there's a freer passage, what I'm interested in is finding out, is there a reduction in the number of animal strikes that's measurable on those segments of highway?
I can check with them. I don't think that that's being measured yet, but I can check and get back to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions from members? Representative Smith.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Ms. Sprankle, for your testimony. In your testimony, you comment that in 2022, over 4% of the accidents were animal strikes. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference between rural and urban? Is there any in that percentage?
Definitely where there's more people and more cars, there's more accidents. I would have to go back to the data. I'd have to go back to the data to make a definitive answer on that and get back to you. But there definitely, where there's more people and more cars, there were more accidents. I do know that.
It would be an interesting number to know because in our rural areas, we have more animals, I would think. So a lot of our strikes are on secondary roads and secondary highways versus the interstates and in the city areas and across the state, of course, on the Turnpike 80 and a few of the other different highways. So it'd be interesting to know the difference in those accidents, how many were rural and how many were in urban areas, because that might help guide what we want to do with these corridors and where we want them. In the rural areas, I don't see where they'll work because we're on back roads and there's lots of animals and they're going to happen. So
Yeah, and the other thing is there's kind of a limitation with PennDOT's data, and that's noted throughout the report, in that what's getting reported to them is only accidents meeting the requirements of the vehicle code. So they're, your more severe accidents. There's a
right.
major limitation with data in general, because we think insurance data would offer another layer of data just to accurately predict where these are going to happen, where they are happening, and that's currently not collected. So PennDOT's limited currently to just accidents reported to police or PSP. So that's another consideration too, is, are they only getting reported because they're on higher speed limit roads because they're more severe? So there is that aspect as well.
All right, second question. In your testimony, you talked about the Game Commission and how they're limited to $400 per acre. There are exceptions to that, though.
They've gotten, I don't want to say creative because it's not.
Yeah, they have.
Their land trusts have acquired land for them, I believe. That was my understanding in talking with them and with land trust.
I just wanted to bring that point up, so if there's any legislation that we do want to run on increasing the 400, there are already exceptions and ways around that, so we need to make sure we look into that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Twardzik? Very good. Senator Dush, the second time.
Thanks. Did you reach out to the Insurance Federation at all? And they're not collecting the data?
No, as from what we understood from both the Insurance Federation, and we also did check with the insurance department to make sure they haven't ever tried to data call regarding this. Most insurers in Pennsylvania aren't tracking whether you hit a deer or some other object, except State Farm. They're the exception, and that's kind of why we have some data on it. They have projections that they're taking their market penetration and applying it to all PA drivers and trying to come up with an estimate. But yeah, that's a huge data hole in this, honestly.
It actually, quite honestly, confounds me that, with as much, as significant as their payouts are on this, that they would have some data on it. Perhaps with this, they'll start collecting it.
It would be nice.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any further questions from members? Seeing none, is there a motion to release the report to the public? Moved by Senator Brewster. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Smith. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. The report is released to the public. Congratulations, Representative Daley. Last on our agenda is an update on Senate Resolution 110, the Neighborhood Improvement Zone Project. And I want to provide the committee a brief update on our work pursuant to Senate Resolution 110, prime sponsored by Senator Coleman. Senator Brewster and I sent a letter on behalf of the committee on June 6th to the Department of Revenue outlining the information required and not yet received by the committee to complete its performance audit of the Allentown Neighborhood Improvement Zone. Attached to the letter that we provided to the Department of Revenue was a legal opinion from the Legislative Reference Bureau confirming that the committee is entitled to receive and internally review the requested information. We subsequently received a letter dated June 7th from Secretary Brown, who indicated that the department's Office of Chief Counsel will respond to the committee by Friday, June 14th, and we will evaluate the response and determine if further action is necessary later this month to obtain the information that the committee is legally entitled to for our staff to complete its performance audit, which was authorized unanimously by the Pennsylvania Senate and this committee. Are there any further questions from members? Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering if I could ask a question. As the prime sponsor of the resolution, I'm wondering if we could, if you'd be able to explain, or if Director Latta would be able to explain which, in the resolution, I list a part that I tasked the LBFC to evaluate the tax revenues collected within the neighborhood improvement zone, including but not limited to employer withholding, employer compensation, sales and use, corporate net income, bank share, realty transfer, cigarette, other tobacco and liquor taxes. Could you please explain which one of these revenues the Secretary Brown has refused to provide so far to the committee?
I will defer to our executive director. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking which data set we have not yet received.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Latta.
Sure. On several dates, I have them here, we sent what we always send when we do studies. We call them information requests, and they outline what we're required by our resolutions to complete our work. And we sent one on the 15th of April, the 9th of May, and we received responses from them. And the responses do outline in detail some of the taxes, that being the issue. We got a lot of other information easily from the department. There's a group of taxes that not a lot of companies or individuals may pay, so they're blocked together, and seeing them blocked or grouped together, I shouldn't say blocked, grouped together, and that adds difficulty or makes it impossible for us to complete that objective. I don't know that I'd want to say definitively which taxes those are, because we've made a commitment as the committee to keep that information confidential. We take that commitment very, very seriously, and so given the tradition and the sensitivity here, I don't think I'd answer that question in this forum.
Vice Chairman Brewster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the complexity of the resolution, in hindsight, is stacked with confidential information of individuals. And I think giving everyone enough time to vet what we're asking for and what we can get is only fair. We haven't received a response from Secretary Brown, and I don't think anyone here would want to say right now what Senator Coleman, what specifics that may be excluded or included, in all fairness. I think when the resolution was probably passed, there wasn't much discussion about the individual's confidentiality of their private information. So this is not something we normally take lightly, as the director said. And the chairwoman and myself did send a letter simply confirming that here's what we'd like to have to do the audit. We have staff doing the audit, correct, Director? So this is kind of routine business, but every now and again we run into a resolution. It gets a little more complex as we dig more into the data that we need. So we're right now waiting for the response, I think, in fairness, Senator.
So to be clear, the confidentiality surrounds a revenue where there's less than a few payers. So that's what we're saying, right?
Confidentiality, I mean, I don't know what the detail would look like,
Well, you
but
tell
I
me.
think it's safe to say that the information belongs to an individual somewhere along the line. And I'm not prepared to say what someone would want to release. But I'm not quite sure I understand what your point is here.
Yeah, I'm wondering which revenue.
Well, I understand
Example,
that
have
part,
we
but
gotten have we gotten the specific individual cigarette and tobacco tax from the Secretary of Revenue to date? Have we received the individual cigarette tax totals? I'm just wondering. There's no secret here.
I
This
think
isn't a
it's
secret
fair to
program,
ask what
with all
we've
due
received,
respect.
Director. If we've received anything,
No, I'm asking, my question, to be clear, I don't want to make this confusing. Have we received the totals of the tobacco tax individually from the zone, from the Secretary yet? This is not a secret program. I'm just wondering, trying to understand what he's released to us and what he hasn't. Just trying to get an update.
And we will be very happy to get that information to you. What I can tell you is that this committee and its staff have always, our staff has been the utmost in terms of their professionalism and their confidentiality, and that they regularly review very sensitive data and data that's necessary for the General Assembly to receive the information that they've asked for in these reports that they have tasked us with completing. And you have our commitment that as chair and vice chair and this whole committee, that we are committed to getting the information that is necessary to complete this audit.
Thank you, and just to reiterate, I'm not asking what the revenue was, the totals, I'm not asking any, I'm just asking, did we receive that? But I understand I can't be told if we've received that data, because this is secret, so thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Samuelson.
Thank you, and I appreciate that this audit is moving forward, and I appreciate our chair and our vice chair talking about the process. I just want to state that I don't think this committee's should be looking for people's individual tax returns. I think we're all grateful that the Department of Revenue does not release our individual tax returns as Pennsylvania citizens, whether we're an individual or a Pennsylvania business. I'm on the House Finance Committee. When we talk about tax policy, we talk about tax categories, we talk about the corporate net income tax, we talk about net operating losses, we talk about the personal income tax. We do never ask, as a Finance Committee, for individual tax returns for people or businesses. And that's a confidentiality the Department of Revenue has had for decades. So I don't think.
Point of
that
order,
we
Madam Chair.
should-
The resolution doesn't ask for personal tax returns. That's
So if we have categories
beyond the
of
scope.
cigarette tax or totals of
Senator,
cigarette
if
tax,
we
I
can
think that.
allow the representative to finish, and then we can continue to have this conversation. Representative Samuelson.
Thank you. If the question is, are we getting data about cigarette tax, we should be looking at overall cigarette tax. We shouldn't be looking for the tax returns of individual companies in that zone. So I would just reiterate that we should respect the privacy of individual taxpayers.
And thank you, Representative. And what I will tell you is what we are trying to do is have fidelity to the process and to complete the report as has been requested by that Senate resolution. Senator Coleman, further?
Yeah, just to be clear, the resolution does not seek to obtain personal tax return information. That's not what we're looking at. I would encourage the members to familiarize themselves with the resolution. It does not ask for that. That's not what we're asking for. We're simply wanting to know the revenue totals in each bucket. That's it. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. For remarks or for a comment on this issue and some clarification, I'm going to turn it to Executive Director Latta.
Representative, I can assure you, we haven't asked for individual tax information. I don't want to see individual tax information. We've asked for categories, much like you would see in the budget document. You know, this is the revenue from each of the taxes levied. So we're not, never have and never would ask for individual corporate or individuals' tax returns. That wouldn't be appropriate, so.
Thank you, Director Latta. Seeing no further comments, I would like to note that that concludes our agenda for today's meeting. I want to thank you all for your attendance here today, and I now recess the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee to the call of the chair.